Let's talk about bending technique. Now, that's one of those things that I see a lot of guitar players overwork themselves and not really get the result they're wanting, you know? For example, a lot of times I'll see this. If a guitar player is trying to go for a bend, they'll just use one finger, and it's just not really cutting it, you know? Because you're putting a lot of pressure on just lone wolfing that one finger, but you have more fingers on your fretting hand, and you can absolutely employ, you know, their help to actually get a lot more strength out of a single bend. So check this out. This is something, you know, I picked up from just seeing all the professional guitar players I grew up watching, you know, see them bending like this. If they're doing a bend, they're gonna use multiple fingers, so it's like they have one big super finger that's getting the job done. So we're gonna talk about two things. We're gonna talk about your bending technique and your intonation, which is making sure that whatever note that you're intending to bend to is actually pitch correct, you know? Because it's kind of the Wild West. Once you bend the string, it's like all bets are off, and it's all up to you to make sure you're landing on the right note. So in this case, let's say we're doing this whole step bend here from the 9th fret, right, of the G string. So we're bending from the pitch of the 9th fret to the 11th fret. So starting off, I got my 3rd finger, right? That's gonna be in, you know, the main finger in charge of bending, but it's not the only one, right? Because I can't quite do it. We're gonna need my, you know, or our, right, 2nd finger as well, our middle finger, to be right behind it on the fret. So we're getting twice the strength, right? Twice the finger, which is helpful, but there's still one more piece of the puzzle, and it's the 1st finger here. And what you wanna do with it is not so much use it behind the fret like this, so you have 3 fingers, because you don't really need that. 2 is really enough, usually, unless you're playing straight up telephone wire strings, which I am not. These are 10s, I think. Stringjoy signatures. So I'm doing this whole step bend, and then with my 1st finger, it's resting on the string just right on top of where I'm bending. So it's just resting right here on the D string. And what its role is to make sure that when I'm up there bending, that I'm not getting caught underneath the string above, you know, which is a horrible feeling. You never want to end up in that position. So having that 1st finger there really helps with that. So with those 3, you got a solid team to accomplish that bend. So when you're practicing this, you know, you'll already notice a difference compared to doing that, right? It's a massive difference. And now let's talk about your intonation. So we're bending from here to here in pitch. So this is a little bit of ear training, right? We want to hear the pitch that we're intending to get to. And then slowly bend up to it to give yourself time to think about where the note is going so that you don't accidentally like just blow past it, you know? So you want to go from... So that's what you want to do, is you want to hit the notes first, like, so pick the 9th fret, then the 11th fret, and then back to the 9th fret, and then bend up to the 11th fret in pitch. And that's going to be your exercise, because you're practicing on one hand, this hand, you're practicing your technique, right? But you're also practicing your intonation, which is a combination of your ear and your fretting hand. And this doesn't apply to just whole step bends. This could be half step bends, step and a half bends. Let's say we were to go from, instead of a whole step bend, we just did a half step bend, right? So instead of bending from here to here, we're bending from here to here. So we want to make sure, right, that we're precise with that bend, and then employing the same technique, and then going back to a whole step. And if you really want to get, you know, Stevie Ray Vaughan with it, we can do, or even David Gilmour with it, we can do a step and a half. So it would be from the 9th fret in pitch to the 12th fret. Now that's, you're going to really be pushing, but it's going to also, you know, work to build up your bending technique. And it's especially good for your ear training, because the further away you get, as far as where you're going, you know, as far as what pitch to land on, it's gonna get a little more challenging. Because like I said, the minute you bend that string past the pitch of where it's at, right here at equilibrium, It's the Wild West, right? So you gotta make sure it's all on you to make sure you find that note and you land it. And then that's all you really need to start off with is just your half step bend, whole step bend, and then if you want to take it even further, the step and a half bend. Now you also want to practice these bends with your other fingers. So if you're going to be using less, like let's say with your second finger here, then you got your first one right behind it on the string above. Do the same thing. Practice the half step bends, whole step bends, and then the step and a half bends. And then do the same thing with your first finger. Now with the first finger, it's gonna be the most challenging because you do just have the one finger. But it fares better, I've noticed, than just a single third finger, let's say, for example. And what really helps is the thumb. This is where the thumb is really helpful here. When we have our thumb placed behind the neck like this, like this, or here, right? When we're bending, we're actually going to be, it's like we're pinching. We're doing this pinching motion, bringing the two fingers together. And it helps because when you're putting that pressure with your thumb, you're able to get your whole hand into it rather than just the single finger doing the movement. So this way, when you're doing those whole step and step and a half bends, having that thumb there is really, really helpful. So this exercise is supposed to challenge you because you're wanting to, you want to be able to rely on your fretting fingers when it comes to bending. I almost never bend with my pinky. That being said, I don't advocate for neglecting the pinky, but think of it this way. When it comes to the bending technique, you would have now 4 fingers. It would be even easier. You can do crazy bends with the pinky, If you got those other 2 behind it, and then your first finger there to keep you from getting under the strings, then you're good to go. Now, as always, I encourage that you practice these on all the strings, the half step, whole step, and step and a half bends. But of course, the unwound strings, right, like the high E, B, and the G strings are gonna be where you find yourself bending the most, at least in my personal experience. But you wanna be just as reliable, right, on all of them. And of course, it will get a little tougher as you get to the wound strings because there's more tension. But when you're employing the use of multiple fingers, it'll be a little bit easier. So starting, let's say the 9th fret of the high E string, doing half step, whole step, step and a half. And then same thing on the B string. Oof. By the way, once you're getting to the D, A, and the low E strings, obviously you're going to want to bend downwards, whereas on the unwound strings you want to bend upwards so that you're not falling off the fretboard like that, right? So remember, your intonation, that's just as important here. Oof, starting to sound like a whale noises. There you go. There's another sound effect you can start using. When you're doing a step and a half bend on the low E string, and slowly bring it down, that sounds straight up like a whale noise. It's kind of cool. Now, of course, I encourage that you practice bending with more than just the third finger, right? Practice with the second finger and the first finger as well, and the fourth finger, your pinky, The pinky is like the last pick of the dodgeball team, and it's sad, but it could be very useful to you, especially the fact that it gives you 3 additional fingers to work with if you're having to take some bends. But take note of the kind of stuff that you like to play. You might notice that when you go for a bend, in the context of what you're playing, it might call for a particular finger. Like, for example, I love to play boomer blues licks, That kind of stuff, I find myself bending with my third finger almost all the time, So of course the third finger gets the most action, but if I ever have to move to using another finger, I don't want to have to sacrifice the use of any of the other ones because I'm super comfortable with the third finger. So that's why it's important that I recommend you practice with all of them, but take note of what you use the most. And of course, let that be the one that's the most polished.